In the heart of an ancient cathedral, where prayers once whispered like dust, a small crimson dragon hatchling has just awakened, and with one careless breath, the stars themselves have begun to tremble, reality bending as 6 unprepared monks realize they may have summoned not a blessing, but the key to unmaking the universe. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The dragon hiccuped, and 3 tiny lights in the high window blinked, as if the sky had caught a cold. Elder Marin stood in the center aisle and pulled at his robe cuffs again. He looked calm, but his hands told another story. He had promised the Order of Radiant Keepers that morning would be quiet. He had promised a simple check of gears, a gentle polish of icons, a routine prayer. Instead, a crimson hatchling rested on the altar, bright as a coal and small as a bakery loaf, and the whole cathedral felt awake in a new way. This opening moment sets the hook for an inspiring sci-fi story, a mystery for listeners who enjoy real-life lessons wrapped in wonder. The hatchling watched them with clear amber eyes. Its scales shifted from cherry to ember whenever colored glass touched them. The thin wings stayed folded, but the skin showed faint lines like a traveler's map. The creature gave off a cinnamon and workshop scent, warm and a little strange. The air itself felt careful, as if the building were politely holding its breath. This scene invites the audience to lean closer, to stay with the story voiceover and hear how small choices can turn into large changes. Sister Dova knelt to Marin's left, sleeves slightly scorched from an earlier chase down the side aisle. She kept her voice low. She asked if the guidance text had truly said, "Place it on the altar." Archivist Joan, thin and steady, opened a heavy book and pointed to a page as if it were a compass. He read the line about a small catalyst, a sanctified surface, and patient waiting. The words sounded simple, but the moment did not. This contrast builds suspense for viewers who love inspiring stories with clear steps that still surprise. Brother Tamer shifted on stiff knees and tried to joke about the wait time. His voice shook and then settled. Novice Pial, youngest of them all, watched the dragon with open kindness. He wondered if quiet would help it feel safe. Sister Luth stood by the northern pillar, eyes on the stained glass. Those windows usually showed people fixing broken tools, a local kind of wisdom. Now they rippled with lines and arrows, like the sky had started to write in the language of light. The description creates a strong visual for searchers who enjoy a fantasy story told in simple English. Elder Marin raised a hand for stillness. He reminded them that the ritual of skywaking was older than their order. He said they should trust the room, trust each other, and trust the careful way good work begins. The altar gave a soft hum, like a large cat thinking. Beads at Joan's belt drifted up and circled one another, calm and blue. Nobody ran. Nobody breathed too fast. This is steady narration for voiceover, paced so listeners feel the rhythm and stay engaged across the first 2 minutes. The hatchling stood and stretched. It arched its back, tapped one tiny claw on the stone, and released a line of soft clicks. The sound was not a threat. It was closer to someone waking an old instrument. Thin dew formed on the walls and slid down like liquid daylight. The air tasted clean. Elder Marin wanted to open the manual again, but a better instruction rose inside him. Listen. As he listened, the cathedral replied with a warm voice that seemed to come from the beams and the floor at the same. The request was simple. They obeyed. On the 7th count, stars appeared above the pews. They were the size of apples and bright as truth. They drifted without burning, each following a gentle path. Pial reached a hand toward one. It bobbed away like a shy lantern. Luth hummed a harvest tune she knew from childhood. The stars glowed a little stronger. Joan's ink rose up the page and wrote a small, neat curve all by itself. Tamor forgot his knees and watched the windows. The glass left old scenes behind and turned into moving charts, almost like the sky had unrolled a map across the ceiling. The room held a quiet that did not feel empty. It felt like a pause before a promise. Elder Marin understood that this was not danger from the outside. This was a door opening from within. He felt it in his heartbeat. He spoke with a voice made for steady work and clear weather. He told them they would. The altar hummed again. The windows drew brighter lines. The stars arranged themselves in a slow spiral above the altar. Patient as a tide, the entire scene invited the listener to stay for what came next, to witness a gentle beginning that could change everything. And then a thin, cool note slid along the edge of the warm air, almost too small to catch. It was not a sound of welcome. It was a sound of want. The spiral above the altar tightened, the windows dimmed by a shade. Sister Dova lifted her head like a scout on watch. The cathedral's voice lowered, but stayed kind. It spoke of a touch at the threshold, a visitor that did not greet. Elder Marin stepped closer to the altar and kept his hands open. He asked what they should do. The answer came in plain words, made for real life and for science both. The cathedral asked them to sing, soft at first, then full, and the quiet order prepared to become a choir, and the noisy hatchling, small and bright, prepared to lead them forward. The stars floated just above the pews, steady and small, each one glowing like a lantern hung in still water. Elder Marin stood, with his hands clasped and his heart steadying itself against his ribs. The air felt alive, like the room had finally remembered its own name. The crimson hatchling on the altar blinked slowly, as though approving this quiet wonder. It seemed certain of its place, and that certainty reached through the air like warmth. This set the tone for what would become one of the most remarkable stories the Order of Radiant Keepers would ever tell. Sister Dova stayed kneeling, though her back had gone stiff. Her eyes followed the stars as they drifted in smooth lines across the cathedral ceiling. She whispered to Archivist Joan, asking if the old texts had mentioned anything like this. Joan did not answer right away. He was busy pressing his fingers over the pages of a thick book, as if listening through his hands. The ink was moving by itself, rearranging into new shapes, small loops that looked more like orbits than letters. His breath caught softly. This was no ordinary moment. This was the kind of moment people tell and retell in stories meant to inspire courage. The stained glass windows stopped showing their usual scenes of humble labor and began to stretch into living diagrams. Colored light folded into spirals, circles, and faint symbols none of them had ever seen. Sister Luth stood near the northern pillar, her head tilted back, eyes sharp. She said the shapes looked familiar, like the harvest lights that crossed the valley skies each autumn. Her voice was quiet but firm. When she hummed a low note, one of the small stars glowed brighter, as if answering her. The room seemed to listen to her memory, and the listening felt kind. Novice Pial rose slowly from where he had been sitting on his heels. His face carried the soft wonder of someone seeing the night sky for the first time. He held out a cautious hand toward a drifting star, and it bobbed gently away from his touch. He whispered that it was shy, like a bird not yet sure if the world was safe. His words made the others breathe easier. If the stars could be shy, then they were not only powerful, they were alive. This helped the voiceover stay close to the listener, making the scene clear, personal, and real. Brother Tamwer muttered numbers under his breath. He had always been the one who measured things, who believed everything could be counted. Now the numbers lined up in patterns that made sense, but not in any way he had ever known. They felt more like lullabies than equations. Still, he spoke them aloud, and the stars tilted slightly, as though considering his words. Sister Dova smiled despite herself. She said, perhaps even the stars liked being named. Elder Marin stepped closer to the altar. He kept his hands at his sides. Not raised, not reaching, just open. The hatchling watched him. Its scales shifted from ember red to soft rose and back again, like a sunset breathing. It opened its wings halfway. Faint lines lit up on the thin skin, forming star maps no one had drawn. It let out a gentle sound, not a growl, not a hiss, more like the distant call of something waking. The altar answered with a deep hum. Dust drifted down from the ribs of the ceiling, glinting like ground diamonds as it fell. Then the cathedral itself spoke. Its voice came from the stones, from the glass, from the beams, and from the floor. It was not loud. It was warm and calm, like the memory of a familiar teacher. It said, "Network pulse heard. This place was sleeping. Your small companion carries a key." The words made their skin prickle. Elder Marin asked what the key would open. The cathedral said, "The bridge between here and the bright paths." No one moved or spoke for a long moment. Even the air waited. Outside, through the narrow slot high above, it did not break or fall apart. It simply moved, as though it had been out of place for years and had just remembered where it belonged. Sister Luth whispered that the sky was settling its bones. Novice Peel said it felt like coming home from a long walk. The listeners of this voiceover can hear how the scene builds, how the words keep steady time, so the suspense grows without rushing. The floating stars gathered closer now, like children answering a roll call. They drew paths through the air, leaving glowing threads behind. These threads curved around the columns and along the arching beams, wrapping the whole cathedral in quiet constellations. Archivist Joan tried to write them down, but his pen followed the lights instead of his hand, drawing shapes he did not recognize. He let the pen go. It kept writing by itself, sketching soft arcs on the page. Sister Dova looked at Elder Marin. She asked what they should do. Elder Marin did not have an answer. He only said they should trust the stillness and wait for the pattern to finish speaking. His voice was steady and low, made for guiding others through difficult storms. The hatchling seemed to hear him. It tapped one small claw on the altar. The hum deepened. The stars stopped drifting. They held their places like notes, waiting for the next chord. Then, at the edge of all that light, something colder stirred. It was thin, almost silent, like the faint scrape of stone underwater. Sister Dova lifted her head sharply. The cathedral's warm voice lowered. It said, "An unknown shape stands at the threshold. It does not greet, it only takes." The words passed through them like a draft. Elder Marin took a breath and stepped forward. He asked what they must do. The cathedral said, "Sing, soft first, then full," and the stars trembled like bells ready to be struck. The cold arrived without sound. It slid into the cathedral like a shadow poured from a cracked jar, thin and patient. Elder Marin felt it first in his teeth, a faint ache that did not belong to his own body. He stood still, not trusting his legs. The floating stars trembled. The hatchling on the altar raised its head, amber eyes sharp and bright. Its scales shifted from ember red to deep purple, like storm clouds holding fire. This was not night. This was hunger with no mouth. The tension gripped the room and pulled the listeners closer, the way every great story pulls at the edge of fear. Sister Dova spoke low and clear. She said they should stand together. Her voice steadied the others. Novice Pial clutched the edge of a pew, small hands tight but not shaking. Brother Tamor wiped sweat from his brow, though the air had grown cold. Sister Luth kept her gaze locked on the trembling stars, as if daring them to stop. Archivist Joan pressed both palms flat on his book, as though holding the world in place. They were only 6 people, yet they stood like a wall. This detail grounds the voiceover in simple words while keeping the suspense alive. The cathedral spoke, softer now, like a whisper behind stone. It said, "Unknown pattern, no shared history, no voice of welcome, appetite only." The words slid through the air and made it feel thinner. Elder Marin knew they could not fight what they could not see. They had only their voices, their courage, and each other. He gave a single nod. "Then we sing," he said. Sister Luth began, a low hum that curled like smoke around the cold. Brother Tamar followed, with a thin thread of sound, high and shaking, then steady. Novice Pyle found a bright, trembling note that made the stars pause and listen. Archivist Joan surprised himself with soft chimes that slipped between the other tones. Sister Dova anchored them all with a clear line that rose like a banner. Elder Marin's voice joined last, deep and slow, a sound like roots holding the earth. The simple, steady phrasing keeps the voiceover calm, even as the danger grows. The hatchling did not sing with breath. It sang with light. Its scales brightened one by one, glowing in patterns like constellations, drawing themselves across its body. Thin rays laced out from its wings, touching the floating stars. Those stars brightened, steadying their orbits. The cold pressed harder, cracking hairline lines along the far wall. Frost that was not frost formed, dark and dry, eating the color from the stone. The cathedral said, "Increase harmony by 3 measures. Do not stop." Their voices grew. Pyle's tone climbed like dawn rising over a ridge. Tamor wove a winding counterline behind it. Joan's chimes rang faster, clear as glass. Dova's melody surged strong and sure. Marin deepened his note until it shook the pews. Luth lifted her hands and traced shapes in the air, soft arcs that left faint lines of light. The stars followed her gestures like pupils learning from a patient teacher. The cold faltered. The lines in the wall stopped growing. This description supports search interest by showing courage, teamwork, and wonder all at once. Then the hunger pushed again. It did not roar. It tried to unmake sound itself. The cathedral dimmed. The air thinned. For a heartbeat, their voices wavered. The hatchling gave a sharp trill, clear and cutting. The sound drew a line through the air, like a blade of light. The cold hit the line and stalled. The stars swung back into place. The frost marks retreated. The cathedral's voice rose again, firmer. We see its shape now. It is not a creature. It is a wrong pattern pretending to be hunger. Elder Marin understood. It was not alive. It was a broken echo, trying to— You cannot take the song. You can only be invited. He felt the others do the same, each offering not fear, but refusal wrapped in kindness. The hatchling breathed light, slow and steady, not forcing, only giving. The cold shivered. The cracks along the wall sealed like lips closing on silence. Color seeped back into the stone. The cathedral whispered, threshold clear. The frost smell faded. The stars glowed bright and calm. One by one, they rose toward the high slot above and slipped out into the sky, leaving soft trails that faded like sighs. The silence that followed was wide and warm. Elder Marin lowered his voice to a murmur. "We held," he said. Sister Dova smiled, her shoulders loose for the first time all night. Novice Piao rubbed his eyes and grinned faintly. Tamar leaned on the pew, pale but standing, and began calmly grooming its wing as if it had only been tidying a shelf. The scene closed in soft relief, letting the listener breathe again, while knowing the story was not finished yet. The cathedral slowly grew still, like a bell quieting after the last strike. The stars had gone, drifting back to their rightful places beyond the high slot in the ceiling. The air was warm again, the stone steady under their feet, and the strange cold was gone, as though it had never been. Elder Marin stood with his hands behind his back, eyes on the small crimson hatchling curled at the center of the altar. It licked one tiny claw, calm and content, as if saving the cathedral had been nothing more than tidying up a shelf. This peaceful return caught everyone off guard. and that made it even more beautiful. Sister Dova knelt nearby, her robe hem faintly singed, her breath steady for the first time in hours. She watched the hatchling and smiled a tired smile. She said it was hard to believe something so small could hold so much light inside it. Archivist Joan wrote notes on the last blank page in his book, his script slower than usual, each word chosen with care. He wrote that the world had changed shape and yet somehow stayed kind. This simple language fit the quiet tone, making the moment feel close and real for the voiceover listener. The hatchling stood and hopped down from the altar. Its claws made soft clicks on the stone floor. It walked with easy purpose to a square of floor that none of them had noticed before. The stone folded back without a sound. Beneath it was a neat little hollow lined with glowing moss, a bowl shaped like a shallow star, and a round pad that shimmered like woven sunlight. Novice Peel gasped softly. The hatchling turned once in the space, then sat down inside it with the pleased air of someone arriving home. The cathedral spoke in its warm voice. Prepared long ago, this place remembers its guests. Elder Marin raised one eyebrow and asked how long the guest would stay. The cathedral answered, until it chooses to travel. Young guides need care. Care builds strength. The word care settled over them like a soft blanket. Sister Luth said they could give care. She said it like a promise. This moment showed the shift from fear to responsibility, a change clear enough for the voiceover audience to feel. Brother Tamer rubbed his sleeve where the fabric had scorched. He said they would need better robes. Sister Dova agreed and said they would also need rules, because rules kept kindness from turning into chaos. Joan offered to write a guidebook, something simple with drawings so anyone could understand. Novice Pial said he could make the drawings bright and friendly. Luth said she could ask the valley weavers to help spin fireproof cloth. Their voices were calm, and calm sounded like hope. The cathedral added gently, young guests enjoy the outside. Please walk the hatchling each day along the ridge path. It likes the third dimension, but the ridge will do. Elder Marin gave a small laugh, the kind that comes from deep relief. He said he could do that. He said they all could. The hatchling looked up at him, and for a moment, the light in its eyes softened from starlight to something close to trust. This showed the heart of the story, the moment where wonder became care. Outside, a bell rang once, soft and low, though no one had pulled the rope. The sound drifted through the open slot above them. The village beyond would wake to skies a little clearer, air a little lighter, and dreams they could not quite name. They would never know that their quiet peace came from a small dragon and 6 tired keepers who had chosen to stay calm when the world shook. But the cathedral would remember, and the walls would keep humming gently as they always had. Elder Marin placed a hand on the big desk at the end of the aisle. He told them they would need to send a report to the council. Brother Tamor groaned softly and asked how to explain what had happened without making anyone spill their tea. Sister Dova said they would use plain words and steady facts, because truth did not need fancy wrapping. Novice Pial said he would add small, smiling stars to the pages, so the council would not be afraid to keep reading. Joan wrote the title in clean letters, A Simple Guide to Bright Visitors. The hatchling rose from its glowing bed and padded over to Elder Marin. It pressed its warm head against his knee. Without thinking, he reached down and scratched gently behind its small horns. A soft hum passed through the stone floor, like the whole cathedral was pleased. Elder Marin said they would divide the work. Pial and Dova would handle feeding and walks. Luth would arrange the robes. Joan would write and draw. Timur would shape their scattered notes into a report people could actually finish. They all nodded, and it felt like planting seeds. This steady ending voice showed the shift from crisis to care, giving the listener peace. The hatchling turned in a slow circle, curled on its glowing pad, and closed its eyes. Its breathing settled into a soft rhythm that matched the gentle hum in the walls. Elder Marin picked up a plain quill and began writing their report. He wrote that light liked to be invited, that songs could be tools, and that care was a kind of science. His voice was quiet when he spoke, but sure. He said they had good work ahead of them. They all agreed, and the cathedral, calm and watching, hummed a low, steady note of approval as the bright small dragon dreamed of tomorrow's walk under a better sky.